unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, brought to you by Souls and Liberty in partnership with MyPillow.com. Something very few thought possible even a few years ago is happening right before our eyes: the collapse of the ruling class. It's an upending of the established order of business as usual, not seen since our Lord stormed into the temple and flipped over the money changers' tables. Of course, the same underlying principle is at work in both cases, today and 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem: egregious abuse of authority and trust. In Jesus' case, it was the abuse by religious leaders in conjunction with the political leaders. Today, it's the abuse by political leaders in conjunction with religious leaders. And again, in both cases, it's the little man being screwed over. The money changers not only violated Jewish law by being within the temple precincts, they also would cheat with the scales and therefore rob the little man. Communist deep state actors have also cheated to the tune so far of hundreds of billions of dollars. And of course, it's the little man again being screwed over. It's all coming down to a question of justice, and justice is, of course, one of the four cardinal virtues. Without the abiding by, no man can move towards sanctity and thereby his salvation. Trump and his team have stormed into D.C. like Robin Hood going after the money wagons in Sherwood Forest, and the sheriff of Nottingham is now branding all of this as illegal and Trump, Elon as outlaws. For the record, historians generally agree that Robin Hood was Catholic. It's pretty darn certain that deep state portrayals of Trump and Elon like this, they're not going to pass the smell test with most Americans. Justice, fairness is rooted in the human psyche because it was put there by God who created us. It's why in the development of Catholic doctrine over the past 2,000 years, it's been recognized as a chief virtue, justice that is, along with fortitude, temperance, and prudence. Salvation of a nation as a whole or any given man as an individual is not possible without the embracing of those four virtues and trying to live them the best they can be carried out, or in the case of a nation, infusing laws with them and carrying out those laws, executing them, which is what Trump and his band of merry men and women are doing. The sheriff is fighting back, rushing off to the friendly deep state judges who will try to gum up the works, but one sort of gets the sense even that won't work very well or for very long. A momentum shift favoring justice has seized hold in the country, and it doesn't seem it's going to be stoppable. And that's a good thing. You get the feeling that the communist deep staters are in the process of being ruined, and it's just a matter of time until the warrants and handcuffs are brought out. And my gosh, we're only 3 weeks in. Joining us now to talk about the mood of the nation is Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Polling. Mark is, in fact, the chief pollster there for Rasmussen. I've followed Mark and his stuff for forever. I don't remember. Too long to count, I suppose. Mark, thanks for joining us. Great to have you on, man.
Yeah, wild times. Wild times. What a great time to be a public opinion professional, because it matters, and it is changing really rapidly, and there's a whole lot of lies out there about it, too. The mainstream media would have you believe that there's utter chaos and people are horrified by Elon Musk getting in under the hood and just ripping parts of the engine out. And the fact is, America's really chill right now. It's happy, in fact. We asked the question, is the country headed in the right direction or is it on the wrong track? And the number today, right direction, is 46%. That's the second highest it's ever been. It's only ever gotten to 47%. And right direction, wrong track has only ever been at parity once. We are 1 point away from parity right now. So people are really happy. Wow. It turns out it's because this election was a referendum on government overreach, the oligarchy, the American dream being stolen by the kleptocrats. And that's what we're seeing. It's being uncovered. And I really don't know what it's going to do to opinion, but it's going to be wild.
Yeah, I mean, that really sort of hits the... That's incredible, really, that it's at the almost highest right track and almost the lowest wrong track. That's shocking.
Yeah, things are going in the right direction. And the last time they were this high this is a little bit of an outlier, because usually what happens is in our formerly red team, blue team kabuki theater, when things were a lot less dire for the Americans, What would happen is a new president would get into office and people would give him the benefit of the doubt. Their approval would shoot up to 60, 65%.
Right.
Right track would come up as well. That really started to die after even really the beginning of Obama. It was when we last saw somebody in the 60s. And that was part of it. I think under Obama, people are just like, no, that's it. A lot of people thought he was an open socialist. And then with Trump, everybody was so Trump deranged. You're just never going to see that era of 55, 60, George W. Bush got up to almost 90% after 9/11. It's never going to happen again until we have decades of economic correction.
Right.
And what happened is that at the end of people's term, their approval would peter out and right direction would sink. Well, that was different for Trump 1. In February of 2020, things were actually getting better. People were getting happier, and his economic policies aimed at the middle class were starting to take effect. Now, he wasn't getting credit for it. His approval was kind of stuck in the high 40s,
right?
But people were happier as measured by right direction. And then what happened? They got punched in the face,
COVID,
by a virus that we now know was funded by USAID. Like that's what happened, and awfully coincidental.
Yeah,
but here we are again.
I'm curious because we've had this discussion here in the studio and with friends. I think a lot of people, just kind of, honest-minded people just saying, hey, what's a possibility on the table? Just, I don't know if you've done any polling on it, but if you haven't, just do you have like sort of a personal opinion? We know that USAID paid for it, went to EcoHealth and then, just kind of follow the money trail over to Wuhan. Do you think that was separate from how it was then weaponized in the 2020 election? Or was this all just part of some plan, some like master plan, like, well, let's invent this virus and let's release it and let's kill millions and let's terrify everybody and then let's change all the voting rules? I mean, that seems like, that's some pretty like 9-level chess right there, but that's how it turned out.
What I can say is that our weaponized media class has perfected pearl clutching. They've perfected the ability to take something that is reasonable to believe and say that it's completely outrageous.
Right.
And they have overplayed their hand because during the Biden administration, people woke up big. They lost their faith in the government. Everything like the FBI and the DIJ, the favorability numbers plummeted. People got to the point where 60% were calling the media the enemy of the people. That's starting to abate now because of independent media, but the level of untrust was high. And so, this is right in our strike zone. Of course, we asked about this. How likely is it that the COVID-19 virus originated in a Chinese laboratory? And this was asked May of 2021 when they were showing pictures of Chinese wet markets.
Yeah,
and 43% said very likely. Yeah, right. 43% very likely, another 25% somewhat. So do the math. That's almost 7 in 10 Americans.
Yeah, that's almost 2/3.
They were like, that's where all the media trust went. It's the media gaslighting people when it's like, no, we can see with our own eyes. The exact same thing is happening now. If you hadn't seen it or your viewers hadn't, that interview where Jon Stewart sits down with the deputy director of the Department of Defense is just absolutely astonishing. I don't know when the interview was, but it was linked by Elon maybe a day or two. And it shows exactly what happens is that down there, you get to DC, you get this power, you get part of this machine. Some of them like truly convince themselves they're doing right by the American people. But at the end of the day, they create this mental construct that everybody in America sees through. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it might not even matter if the government planned it or not. It's like, okay, well, you set the whole thing up and then you lied to our face. Yep. That's what the impact is having. And it's a really good question because, we were funding it, but the release, if it happened, probably would have happened in September, October the prior year. And so you say, well, there's no way that it was coordinated or they could have predicted but then you also say, well, they did set up, they literally had a report come out the month before it would have been released about how even though America was number one in the world, I forget the organization that did it, but it was an offshoot of, some of these policy institutes that put together this scorecard on vulnerability to viruses. And so for years before the COVID was released, there was like a hustle operation to put together this, global force. And so it's like awfully hard to look at things like that and say it's coincidental. And so,
Yeah, I mean, they were doing these war game type scenarios the year before about what happens if a virus got released or whatever, a virus occurred, or however you want to phrase it, and doing all this game planning. And, and Fauci in particular talked about all of that stuff 6 months before news came out. And he was on CNN talking about it. Here's what we're doing. And, hey, any virus could come out at any moment. And it's just like, man, really? This seems weird that, I mean, maybe it's a coinky dinky, but it's quite the coinky dinky if it is one.
He's made his entire, recent professional career around this topic. It's like this is the hustle in DC. If you can convince somebody plausibly that you have an important issue, then you can get it funded by the U.S. taxpayer, and then it all can get proliferated through a web of NGOs, and it all becomes kickbacks.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It's amazing. I mean, I think the last number I saw, I don't know if it was from Elon himself or on the Doge thing or whatever, but I think it was like $890 billion. I mean, it's approaching $1 trillion of money, not just U.S. aid, but all of it. And I mean, he hasn't even gotten to the cash cow yet over at the Pentagon.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is torches and pitchforks kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Because you could say, oh, well, it didn't all get stolen. It went to fund good work and stuff like that. If we're approaching a scenario, and again, I think Medicare and Social Security, now that we know that there's complete and utter chaos inside the databases, people can do whatever they want and all payments get approved. If literally $1 trillion, 50% of our current deficit is all just annual fraud.
Yeah.
That's stealing the future of my children.
Absolutely.
That's preventing them from being able to mortgage a house. That's hollowing out the middle class. This is an important one, and it's not polling. I love numbers. And people can find it if they go to my Twitter account and search for the word median. I put a chart out recently where a lot of people compare our economy, they use GDP, and I've been overlaying, well, what does our debt growth look like compared to the market and to prices? And the expansion of our federal debt is tied very closely, recently correlated very highly with stock market. So people can look at Biden and say, oh, he's great for the market. Well, it's it's all fake, right? Yeah. It's all nominal gains. But what I was looking at
they even revised down the Biden's job numbers last year. When it's all said and done, those job numbers had to be revised down almost 1 million jobs. The whole thing just seems like smoke and mirrors.
What I was surprised is that the BLS came out with another 4% unemployment rate. I thought we were going to see 52% for Trump's first unemployment rate, but I do it every month and I get a number between 8 and 9%, and that's 9,000 Americans. So I'm polling almost as many people as, the Federal Reserve Bank or whoever does that survey, Michigan or whatever. So I think that's fake. But what I did is I took per capita share of total debt, and I put that in a ratio over median income. And so it's like the middle person in America, how is their income relate to the amount of debt they're going to have to pay off? Right. Not can we pay our debt down as a country or not? It's like, no, how hard are the middle class pushing on the boulder? And what's weird is that number was pretty stable at about 0.5 up until the great financial crisis. Yep. And ever since Republicans and Democrats started working together on bipartisan relief bills and stuff like that, the number started shooting up. It's like literally it all happened at once. Obama got in, Bernanke got in, they socialized all the banking losses. And now that number went from 0.5 to 2.5. So Joe Sixpack is 5 times less capable of contributing to our country's future than just 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's shocking. That's a whole that's happened in one generation.
That's when America turned into theft. They stole everybody's future. You can see it on that chart. Death of the middle class.
Well, let me ask you this, Mark. There's, I don't think it's accurate, and so therefore not fair, to classify, look, whatever you want to call it, the uniparty, the deep state. I mean, there's a game in Washington. And sure, the parties might differentiate themselves, here or there, particularly when they're playing to their bases and they know that whatever they do isn't really going to result in any legislation anywhere. They're just up there mouthing off on committees and whatever, and posting, self-glorifying videos on their X accounts. Most of the Democrats are certainly in on the whole deep state world, and not an unsubstantial number of Republicans as well. And it seems that this has really, I mean, I think you phrased it there well. It's a torches and pitchforks sort of thing. That's a ruling class. They profit. I mean, when we heard that Chelsea Clinton had $84 million funneled to her through the old USAID thing, and you just keep seeing these numbers coming out, and how in the heck do some of these folks who make $175,000 a year as senators and congressmen, whatever, after 10 years in office, all of a sudden they're worth 50, 80, $200 million of their net worth. How does the deep state actually pay for this? How is there retribution against these people besides just exposing it? Because it seems like that's not enough.
It's not just the deep state. And it's so nefarious and evil. It really is. And everybody, I've always had sort of the complex view of this. A lot of people have been looking for a simplistic answer. Oh, China's bribing them. Oh, it's George Soros. Well, it turns out, no, George Soros is probably on the dole just like everybody else.
Yeah.
What
is it? He had $250 million, $300 million to Soros?
Oh, is it that high?
Yeah, I seem to think it was there. I think it was like 260 million. The fact that there's more than a penny going to him is one thing, but when you're talking about a couple hundred or 300 million, whatever it was, I mean that's just insane.
It's perverse. Literally, everybody is on the dole. You have the welfare class. You have the illegal aliens that are here for what it turns out are probably money laundering reasons more than anything else, not electoral. Big surprise to me because I did think it was electoral, and it was hilarious that they lost the Hispanic vote. No, they're just siphoning money probably off of trafficking. And then the billionaires are on the dole, like CEOs and companies, like the banker class is on the dole. All of this money that gets printed has to be the debt has to be sold by investment bankers. So literally everybody is on the dole except for traditional tax-paying Americans.
Yeah.
That's who's getting screwed. It's a fleece job. This is, and listen, hey, if this is my new job, I love polling and we're really good at it. But if my new job is bloviating about how evil the U.S. government has been and how it's robbed everybody's future for the next 2 or 3 years, public opinion's got to change on this.
Yeah.
And this isn't political. I'm a pollster. I believe in public opinion and a representative democracy, and that our elite betters should have the interest of the masses, and they haven't. It's all been a joke. And it's just thinking back even to how sick is it that everybody got upset and they formed the Tea Party movement. It was a grassroots movement in good faith to try and reform government. And it was co-opted by people who were being paid by the government.
Yeah.
And turned into Paul Ryan, I think, got money. What?
Yeah.
How sick is that?
I mean, that's what everybody was saying when the whole Tea Party thing was going on in the 90s, where he's like, oh, make sure you don't get absorbed into, the whole Republican establishment, which is essentially what happened. And it, kind of lost its momentum, and you went back to really like red versus blue, at least the portrayal of red versus blue. And it's really, again, while there is some legitimacy to that, red versus blue, I don't think the Trump vote in November was, let's go Republicans. I think it was, let's go we the people and screw all of these people.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And there's still a lot of people, you'll certainly appreciate this, knowing from where you came from, who don't appreciate the new paradigm, because it definitely did shift. Yeah. And I can't put my finger on when it was. It was probably when they raided Mar-a-Lago or something like that, right?
Yeah.
There was a major
It could have been
shift.
any of the lawfare cases also. I mean, when he was found guilty, what did he get within 24 hours? Like $50 million, $100 million or something?
Yeah. Well,
not 24 hours.
People getting gaslit for believing in the big lie or whatever. But I do think there's an aspect of culture to this too, because I think, well, first off, if Trump had won in 2020, we'd be in a totally different scenario. And I think the insane overreach of Biden administration The COVID and all this reaction to wokeism and culture, I think, helped win a culture war in between 2020 and 2024.
Yeah.
So I think all that put us in a situation where all of a sudden it clicked for everybody, and they got mad. And I think, quite frankly, I think Trump won by more than he won by, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, a new paradigm. And then you look to people who are even trying to be bipartisan, but they came from the media organization or they're rooted in DC. I watched Mark Halperin, I watched Two Way, and he likes to summarize on his Twitter feed, like, this is what MAGA is thinking today. And it's all completely off. It's like, oh, MAGA's happy because they're out for blood and they're getting revenge now. It's not bloodthirst. It is moral outrage.
Yeah, it's
and
justice.
Validation.
It's justice.
It's justice. And
there is kind of an element of revenge in justice, but justice properly handled doesn't go after people for revenge. Like, you screwed me, so I'm going to screw you. It's like, you screwed, and there are innocent victims. Revenge is kind of, I don't know, whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend breakup, and, whatever. That sort. The idea of trying to present all of this as revenge, there are innocent victims here. Just to share one little story with you on the overreach on the whole COVID thing, and all those fine military personnel being kicked out because they wouldn't take the shot. And I'm friends with one of them, Navy SEAL, who was like in a big dilemma. I mean, he's sweating it out, and he was like, I don't know what to do here. Take it out, and the battle had boiled down to, would it be an honorable or a dishonorable discharge? Because you wouldn't put something in your body that you didn't want. And I've got a friend that works in the auto industry. Same thing. I mean, sweating it out, and all of the turmoil this causes in families, and all the split and the division, and people worrying about, if you're going to stand there and not get that shot, and then you're going to lose your job because of it, where does that leave us? How can you be so selfish? Yeah.
All
the emotional distress that happened, that doesn't really get talked about in the mainstream media. They just bring on Fauci, and he tells us, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, stand 6 feet apart. Oh, we made that up. There are innocent victims in all of this, and that's who the justice is needed for.
Yeah. The entire self-reinforcing, taxpayer harvesting organization that has absolutely no morals and will literally kill people in order to maintain control. And it's like, yeah, I was there. I lost my corporate career essentially over the COVID and the vaccine. But it got so bad. This is probably one of our most viewed polls that we've ever done. It was January of 2022, sponsored by the Heartland Institute. And what we did was we asked everybody, well, here's just a list of, like, how afraid are you of COVID? Here's a list of things, like, should we do them or not? And they were, of course, escalating. But do you favor or oppose Biden's plan to have a vaccine mandate? And actually, a pretty decent number of people were for it, 48%, and 48% were opposed. So America was split on that. But for the Democrats, it was almost 80%.
Yeah.
And then we kept going. Should Americans get fined? Should they be confined to their homes? And this is where America punched out. They're like, no, 34% favored it, but a lot were opposed. But Democrats still 57%. Would you strongly oppose COVID camps? 45% of Democrats for.
Wow.
Imprisoning individuals who question the efficacy of the vaccine. And this isn't a country with the First Amendment, protected right of free speech. 48% of Democrats. And I think that, like, it just keeps going. Like,
what were the Republican numbers on some of those things in favor of them?
One sec. Yeah. Republican for this is imprisoning people who question the efficacy of the vaccine. 14%, 7% strongly. Combined 14% favor for Republicans. But also the thing is that the independents were very close to Republicans on this. So it was something, and the Trump strong disapprovers who became the Biden strong approvers were by far even more like insane. We had, would you favor or oppose temporarily removing parents' custodies of their children if the parents refuse to take the COVID-19 vaccine? 29%, 3 in 10 Democrats. And it was, I think, like 40% of Trump's strong disapprovers. Wow. So that's the problem. And it got so insane. You'll appreciate this too, coming out of the media industry. We are the only people polling on this stuff at all.
Yeah.
We polled on election integrity. We polled on the vaccines. We got on the government's top 50 list of misinformation spreaders on Twitter, the GSA. And it's like, well, I'm just looking out for the people, and all I'm doing is asking them questions. You could, like, all the pearl clutching coming after us just because we had the gall to ask questions and then go on Steve Bannon to like discuss them. But we asked, what news network
it's the conclusions, Mark. That's what ticks them off. I mean, data's data. Well, it's the necessary conclusions that fall from all of this that, that's what they got to kill.
Threatening a $500 billion a year fraud industry, basically, right?
$500 billion if we're lucky.
What's crazy is like right a few months after like Politico's pro prescription really started taking off with the government, we had a hit piece written about our sponsors. Yeah. So by Politico. And so we've had Washington Post, we've had ABC News and 538 come after us, kick us out of their aggregate. So they've been doing this to literally everybody. And it's like, well, sorry, the slaves are rising up now. Yeah. You made it. You put yourself here. That's what's happening.
Yeah, it is very. It's interesting. I think Trump posted on his X account or Truth Social that he said something like, well, if you hadn't have stolen the election, I wouldn't be president right now.
That's
which is,
true statement.
You got, absolutely. And you got to, you got to wonder, you kind of have the sense that the status quo from Trump 1 would have just stayed.
Yes.
If he'd have been declared the winner, notice how I word that, if he'd have been declared the winner in 2020, and it's kind of weird, the whole God or natural law or however you want to, class all tied together, sort of reasserting itself here, that even the most horrible, crappy, rotten thing, whatever it is, that some good can actually come out of it, and oftentimes does. May not be evident, certainly not while you're in it. I mean, that was awful. Those 4 years were awful.
They were not good. It was not good to be in clown world. But I do think I think we dodged a bullet, because they would have come up with something. Look at what they've done. They've burned every asset. They were willing to nakedly sick the Department of Justice on Trump. They would have done something. They would have used COVID. People were really insane. The groundwork was not laid for what we're seeing now. It just wasn't. And so he might have, through a miracle, had a somewhat successful second term.
Right.
But I even think seeing the big lie contributed in a meaningful way to what put us here. And the problem's not going away. I mean, I'm a pollster. I'm a good pollster, and I still have major doubts about our electoral systems. But Trump is on it now. Yeah. And I think he had doubts himself in 2020, obviously. But do you know, he goes out to California, he meets with Newsom, he's holding, federal funds over his head, and the first thing he asks for is, well, we want voter ID in California.
Yep, bingo.
Yeah, that's a good thing to ask for. That's a very appropriate thing to ask California.
Question on that, however, Mark, and as soon as we answer this, I got to go to a quick break for a second. But it's one thing to have, here's the order. What about on the ground following it? I mean, these things are all run by, people who are at least ideologically, in step with that worldview of deep state and uniparty and the whole bit. I mean, you got people sitting there, and what if they just don't pay attention to it? They just let people vote, don't have voter ID anyway. I mean, I suppose you can snare a few of these folks and bring them up on charges and stuff in California courts. It just seems that the rot is so deep that you've got to go in with a bulldozer in the operating room, not a scalpel.
It needs to be burned to the ground. This is the results of a decade-long crisis of leadership that's afflicting every single institution we have. We have not, in my opinion, I worked relatively high up at a large corporation, Walmart, and I've worked at some other large corporations as well. They were insulated from losses by Bernanke bucks and have adopted some really horrible habits that I don't think we've seen the results of. We all know the rot that infects mainstream church denominations. Yeah. And so it's like there probably needs to be redress for the crisis of leadership, and it's going to take all of America to try and come together and fix it. This is sort of getting us into the fourth turning kind of concept. But what we're finding out is just like probably this fraud in DC, the issues with our electoral system are widespread, soft, distributed, and here's the most important two words, in my opinion, an open secret.
Yep.
It's all an open friggin' secret. Yep. And when Paul Ryan, hopped on the Tea Party movement like a wild horse and rode it to its untimely death, he knew all this.
Yeah.
He knew this stuff. Everybody that goes down there knows it to some extent. And we have not heard anybody come out and say, listen, it's as bad as you thought it was.
Yeah.
And it's worse than I think a lot of people.
Well, I mean, it is one of the things that I think it's a fair criticism that people are pointing out on social media. The MAGA people, patriots, whatever you want to call them, just kind of the middle class folks are saying, where the hell are the Republicans? Where are they right now on Capitol Hill? This is, Elon and Trump and, some of his cabinet stuff pushing things out there and saying, hey, look at this. Hey, $59 million was released by FEMA to pay for FEMA, who didn't have any money for Western North Carolina since Trump was inaugurated, violating an executive order, released $59 million to pay for illegals in luxury hotels in Manhattan. That just, Elon just published that. And people are saying, why is it just Elon and Trump? Where's the Republican Party leadership? Whoa, wait. You guys are all part of this too.
I mean, that's the conclusion. I think it's totally viable for people to draw. And directionally, probably only 20 or 30% of that money actually went to the hotels too, which is...
Oh, yeah, of course.
But it's like, I think there is an aspect of that any smart politician knows that there's been a groundswell shift in the political context in America.
Yeah.
And so I think there's probably an aspect of, I do not want to stick my head above the Trent and get it blown off. Because,
exactly.
So some of the less political savvy people like Amy Klobuchar came out and tried to virtue signal about this. And then Elon and Twitter lit her up in a way that's going to be probably hard to live down for a while. So, there is some of that, but it's like some of them are absolutely they all have big houses. They all get wealthy. And some of it's obviously well-timed stock transactions. And
coincidentally.
Yeah, right. But it looks like everybody just knows that the way you get ahead in DC is to accrue multiple distributed streams of income.
Yep.
And people's incomes being threatened. I don't even know if anybody in DC could actually afford a mortgage if this gets shut off. And so if maybe what we'll see is an entirely new way of whipping votes in Congress. It shouldn't be like, hey, what pork do you want for your district? And did you do me any favors? I owe you back. It should be like, hey, listen, we both know you're implicated.
Yep.
This is your shot for leniency. We need a clean bill, right? That takes all these cuts and runs them through. And if you don't get it, we're going to shut the government down and a new agency dies each day. That's what should be whipping votes right now. It's like, I want to shut down. I think Doge wants to shut down too.
Yeah.
I don't think the Democrats would be very wise to hold a shutdown over Republicans' heads.
Well, that was all their talk on. That was all their talk on the Sunday morning shows. Senator Kim or whatever his name is, he was like, "Well, I'm not in favor of a government shutdown, but we need to stop all this illegal, the executive branch reviewing its books for fraud. We can't have that happening." And I wouldn't dream of shutting down the government, but if I have to do it and vote for it, well, I'd support it then. There's so much here. Mark, let me just take a little quick break and come right back to you. This is fascinating. I love having you on, man. Thank you. This is great. We'll come back, talk about a few other things and general principles and what else is going on and blah, 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 because there's a lot of stuff to just sort of sit and get your brain around. We will be right back right after this.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
All right, welcome back. If you like what we do here, how we talk about it and all that, please click on that donate button and help us out. These are invaluable insights and great guests we have on and all of that. Mark, let me ask you about the Catholic vote, specifically in November. I mean, it was lopsided, overwhelming in favor of Trump. And I went back and spent probably a couple hours or so looking at all the other votes and this and that and seeing, hey, what was an exceptional deal and whatever. It's essentially not quite, it's a hair under, but it's essentially 60-40, 58.6, I think it was, to 40 when you put all the exit polls and things together. 58% plus of Catholics voted for Trump as opposed to 40% who voted for Harris. And that number, you have to go all the way back to Ronald Reagan in 1984. I mean, that's a landslide election that everybody voted in those kinds of numbers for Reagan. So I don't even know if you can kind of do a kind of an apples to apples comparison there, because, here the vote margin for Trump winning 2.5 million, whatever it was, the overall population margin for Trump was, considerably narrower than Reagan's win. So it looked like Catholics just kind of went along in lockstep with the whole rest of the nation in 84. Here they didn't. I mean, there wasn't a 20-point margin for, Trump overall, but there was among Catholics. Why do you think that is? And I know you did some Catholic polling or polling of Catholics, just a couple weeks out before the election. What's your sense on all of that?
This is a very favorite topic of mine. We have a strong Christian bent in Rasmussen Reports, myself as well. And there's not a lot of information out there. And there also seems to be like a lot of misinformation because it is a really complex topic. It's something that sweeps up like the vast majority of America. And there's so many different flavors. And you see a lot of like really doomer headlines, like the dechurching of America. But even as recently as like this was 2021, do you believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God who came to earth to die for our sins? 72% of adults said yes to that question. Only 17% said no. And we've routinely proven that like high 60s, low 70s number over and over and over again, like with questions like how important is religion to your daily life? And so America is still a deeply religious country. And where it gets complicated is we did a poll in October because there was news being put out by researcher George Barna that evangelicals were going to sit out to the tune of like 30 million. And I would say that we went into the field. This was like an emergency poll for us 2 weeks to the election, and we were not able to replicate those results. In fact, we found that only 8% of evangelicals were going to sit out. And half of them were like, well, I'm not a citizen. I'm convicted felon. Like there were reasons why they couldn't vote. So the
convicted
answer
felon
is
evangelicals. There's a subcategory.
Well, they're there. I mean, that's what Jesus is supposed to be doing, right?
Sure.
Saving sinners. So, but in this poll, we also polled Catholics, and it's a sponsored poll, so it's not behind our paywall. We did it in coordination with the Institute for Faith and Culture.
Uh-huh.
And we have the Catholic numbers here, and we can't get through all of it. But if people want to go check it out, they can literally just go download the Excel spreadsheet. It was, like I said, October of 2022. But where it gets muddy is like, okay, well, how many of those Catholics go to church or not? And this wasn't a poll specifically at Catholics. So I don't know if I got too many like West Coast Catholics or East Coast Catholics, but that blew me away because in this poll, I only had Catholics going to Trump by a 5-point advantage. And the evangelicals, it was like 30 points. So it just turns out, I guess I was getting too many like left Catholics in here. That's really strong. That's almost as like triggered as evangelicals were by the Biden administration. And it's like, well, we've asked a bunch of questions in here. Why? And with the Catholic numbers, I will say that they're slightly more conservative on all these social issues than the general population. So it's like, well, they trust Trump slightly more on abortion, not as much as you'd think. They kind of do support this gender stuff more than you'd think. And so that's because there's a lot of Catholics in there that don't go to mass, but it's because some of the people that go to mass watch MSNBC too. Like that's a problem. And ultimately, I think what the theme is here, my theory of the case is that it's about objectivity and it's about like rational thought and making strong, reasoned decisions about your life. And the Biden administration got so bad for people. Yeah. So like bad, like we had 35% of voters saying that today's children, they're only 35 saying today's children will be better off than their parents. 27% saying they're less safe than they were 4 years ago. So people say the economy was the number one thing, but we talked about the middle class getting hollowed out and like people don't think there's a future. The American dream has died and come to an end. And they've witnessed the insanity of the last 4 years. So my theory of the case is there's something about deeply religious people, about people who identify as evangelicals or Catholics that go to mass more, that enables them to make the objective decision about Trump. And I think it's emotional thinkers, who believe the lies and what have you. And to reinforce that view is you look at Trump and you say, oh, he's an entertainer and he's convinced a lot of people to like him and that's why he got elected. No, that's not the case. Yeah. His platform is more popular than he is by far. People want these mass deportations. It's not something that Trump just convinced everybody of. Like they want the illegals shot out of catapults across the border. And so like that's, 10 points more popular than Trump is. So let me ask you this then. If I go back to the Catholic vote question, because the midterms are next. Next up, they're on deck, and obviously it's a different paradigm at work: a presidential election versus a congressional election. But that's a really wide spread. I'm going to call it 20 points. I'm just because it's an easy number instead of saying 18.6. A 20-point spread. In key congressional races, like you got a 1 or 2 seat lead in the House, you got a 3-seat lead in the Senate. Either of those flip the whole legislative agenda, which again, that doesn't seem like either Thune or Speaker Johnson have done anything with so far. I don't know about any new legislation introduced to codify any of these executive orders that are wildly popular. That's the point. They're widely popular. And you're not doing it. Are you not doing it because you know that you're going to get exposed for being part of this whole USAID thing and the whole corruption and the whole deep state and everything? Well, why aren't you doing anything? And normally you'd say, well, in the midterms, things are going to flip against how they went in, the previous presidential election. You almost always lose seats in the House and all that. Do you think, certainly vis-a-vis the Catholic vote, that this just might be another historic type midterm where he doesn't lose seats in the Senate or the House? Well, I would predict midterms with a lot of trepidation.
Sure.
We've been really surprised before. People talk about the 2020 election being an outlier. 2018 was the outlier. That was like a 6 sigma increase in turnout. It was just out of nowhere. It was like presidential level turnout. And some of it might have been fraud, but I think a lot of people were like literally triggered over Russia. And so it's really hard to predict. It's like history would tell you a lot less people will turn out. history will tell you it's probably safe to say that we're going to get a similar turnout to the last couple times, which is Republicans lead on the generic ballot. And it doesn't really turn into much of a pickup because of optimized electioneering in places like California or wherever, right?
Right.
But there's so many chips on the table. If like there could be a groundswell of anger over this government, there could be a massive shift of people to the right. Like Trump could step in a trap and totally, who knows? And we haven't even talked about what Harmeet Dillon might be doing behind the scenes with the Federal Elections Commissions.
Correct.
So this is like a mind blower for some people, but I'm a political pollster and I have no idea how many Democrats there are. I really don't know how many real Democrats there are.
What do you mean by that?
Because how election integrity issues work isn't just like somebody in a room decides to steal it and flips votes in a machine. It's like somebody did something once, it worked 30 years ago, so now they do that every time. And what happens is after an election, pollsters will say, oh, I was kind of surprised by the turnout here. I'll adjust my weighting. So it all gets baked in.
It's interesting as you sort of look at how all of this lays out, hundreds of billions of dollars, approaching $1 trillion. It seems to me that's they're not going to like stop finding this. It's just going to keep going on. I mean, the contract for Elon it goes until I think it's June of 2026, June of next year. We're just going to continually see this, and I think this, like Trump in 2024, really does have the ability. I know there's all kinds of black swan events that could happen and everything else, but following out the trajectory of this, I mean, just how much more pissed off can people keep getting as there's another, the 59 million goes to the luxury hotels there. I mean, this is insane.
Yeah. I mean, this is uncharted territory for sure. This is 150 years of U.S. political history that has seen nothing like this.
Right.
It's just been an endemic part of, gee, I'm sorry, it's too complex. No, it wasn't too complex. Your income just depended on it.
Right.
An open secret. It's an open secret. And it just disgusts me. And listen, I don't think people are at anger yet. I think it's like the thrill and zeal of pulling on a string and knowing it's just keep going. And you're just like, I think everything's on the table. I think literally we're going to find everything. We might find that there are fake Social Security numbers in the Social Security database that are going to give cartel members benefits. And then they tell you, well, there might not be anything left for your children.
Yeah.
We might see that. Like literally anything.
Yeah, I think
we're certainly funding a whole lot of black ops that nobody knows about.
Oh, sure. I mean, there does seem to be some, Mike Benz has made the point. I don't disagree with it, that you have to kind of be aware of what's happening in other countries, and you can't just completely leave a vacuum, because nature abhors a vacuum. And of course, China would love to step into there, and that's what happened in Panama Canal. I think when you just see, look, man has a fallen human nature. And when you see, 19 zeros at the end of a number, and you're in a position to help direct some of that money, I think it's just naive to think that there aren't going to be some actors who aren't going to direct some of that money to them, to their friends, and the network develops. And here we are.
Soft systems with no oversight are easily manipulated, especially ones that have $1 trillion budgets. Like it's complete no-brainer. Like it's very obvious that most of the government workers either had no idea it was this bad, or convinced themselves they were doing good work, or were in a position or didn't have the right integrity equation to put their neck on a line to help solve this. Not one single person.
Yeah,
it took an outsider. It took a strong-willed outsider. And we mentioned it before a little bit. I do think there's something to this concept of fourth turning, this concept of hard times make strong men make good times make weak men. We're at the weak men, hard times intersection right now, because there were a whole lot of weak men that got us here, and they were taken advantage of, obviously. And it became this disgusting self-licking ice cream cone, this like Ouroboros of, listen, I was on a nuclear submarine in 2004 when our target package shifted from Russia to like China and the Middle East. And yet here we are with our three-letter agencies still waging a proxy war with Russia, who's supposed to be like a semi-democratic country. In fact, their elections might be cleaner than ours. Who knows, right? And, they're 70% Orthodox Christian and whatever. But it's like, well, we do all this statecraft to protect our democracy from somebody who shouldn't be our enemy by destroying our democracy internally with our own color revolution tactics. Like, that's what's going on. Now, I was making the joke, like, maybe we're the CIA's R&D operation. Like, it's hard to tell anymore.
Yeah.
Everything is so fake. Like, literally, it's all fake. And it's all going to come crashing down. And the only thing that surprises me right now is they haven't done more to try and stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably, it's very clear, 200 executive orders in 24 hours. It's pretty clear that, maybe it was just he was all ticked off because of the lawfare stuff. Or maybe it was the Butler failed attempt, something. But man, did he come in, loaded for bear with a team that clearly, unlike 2016, had clearly done its research. I think the 2016 team kind of understood philosophically what was at play. But man, this team he's got around him right now, you talk about process oriented. Holy crap.
Charlie Kirk called this an exorcism. This is literally an exorcism. The power of Christ compels you, holding up the cross, driving the demons out of the Potomac. That's what it is. It's like, and what's wild is like religion, I think, really does strongly enter into this. I think drastic Marx's push to pull Christianity out of our culture was part of what got us here. Because I look at it this way, and people say, oh, separation between church and state. Like, whatever. Okay. Answer me this about a representative democracy. You're not making all the decisions yourself. You're instilling trust in a public official to go down there and represent your interests.
Right.
Why should he? Why should he go down to DC and not take a bribe?
Fair enough.
Why should he not lie to you in the face? Like, how do you trust that he's going to do the right thing? And it's like, there's a religious component to that our founding fathers understood. And it's like, you could say separation of church and state all you want. This whole thing falls apart if, that component changes. And I think that's what fell apart. Weakness, lack of integrity, lack of a religious moral core. And it's just crazy that if you go to Reddit right now, which is like the heart of where the resistance is, that it's the loudest echo chamber right now.
Mm-hmm.
What they're saying is that, oh, well, Trump can't possibly be Christian because it's not Christian to turn away all of these needy people coming across our border.
Yeah.
And it's like, the Bible's got some strong words about people who do that, right? who misinterpret the teachings, like many mainline denominations are. I was raised as a Methodist. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in Methodism right now.
Right.
And so it's this entire concept that, like, well, it turns out that when there's $1 trillion of money to steal on the table, will throw their integrity out the window to get a piece with it, to suck up to it. And we got to fix it. How do you fix something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is expansive. I want to ask you, if I can, my wheelhouse obviously is media. You're on media, 24 hours a day, practically. We don't have a lot of time left, but just your thoughts on all of this, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. tax dollars covertly going to New York Times. I can't remember if WAPO was included in that or not, but Politico and just across the board to essentially manipulate public opinion. What do you, just on a personal level, what's your response to that, your reaction?
I mean, that's it. Like, the world is standing up to them. It's a finely tuned lying machine. It's a gaslighting operation that drove people insane. It's literally destroyed families.
Yeah.
If you look at who watches MSNBC, we ask this question. What's the most important issue the president needs to solve this cycle? And we put legal immigration, rising prices, threat to democracy, and abortion. We just gave people 4 things to choose from.
Right.
And 75% of MSNBC people said threats to democracy or abortion were our number one most pressing issues. But on Fox News or Newsmax, the people that trusted those, not like necessarily do you watch it or not, do you trust them?
Right.
And 75% of those people said rising prices in the border. So that's a really strong signal. That's like a bigger signal than was in party. And so there's all these places where party isn't what drives it anymore. It's like this world perception.
Yeah, it's
this
a worldview. Yeah, we've been saying that for years, that this is an ideologically driven thing. How do you see the world? And do you see the world as related to God and morals and the future and children and try to make things as just as they can be, or do you see it as this other version of it? And that's really how you go vote. That's the whole uniparty thing right there. I mean, that's what the division is. Red, blue, it's not nothing, anymore. But that's not the driver.
Yeah, it's changed.
Yeah.
Check this one out. Donald Trump did worse among atheists than he did among Democrats in our polling.
Huh.
So So it is about worldview. And I think like during Trump term 1, we were focused on like the 40% that were really core diehard Trump supporters. Would they break or would they stick with their guy? And it turns out like over the Trump term, he increased that number. He convinced people. It wasn't a lot, but it was more, like enough for him to get more votes than any Republican in history. Now, what I think we're going to be focused on is like the 35% Kool-Aid drinkers that still have a strong disapprove of Trump. About 20 to 25 of them still strongly approved of Biden. It's this like core 30% who are essentially in their own religion. It's a religion. And if you're in that religion and it's not a good one to be in, you'll look around and you say, oh, I don't believe what these people believe, and maybe I'll adjust my view, and you'll leave. The problem is that if you leave, then it becomes more purifying, the religion, right? And it's going to get more insane. And the question is, does it break apart? Does it screw itself up into a resistance somehow? Do people take violent action? And I don't know. I'm surprised they haven't been able to do it yet, but they're trying. Like if you literally search the words coup or resistance on Google Trends, like it's ticking up right now. Like people are literally like it's in the national psyche. And on Blue Sky, I don't even know how to measure that, right? Because like I'll poll them and it's really hard to know like how insane are you? Like literally how insane are you? Like you can't put that into a question. But it's like you go to Blue Sky and it's like literally BDSM imagery and nature photos and a lot of people hugging each other. On Reddit, it's like somebody needs to do something. Somebody needs to do something. Why isn't anybody doing anything? And then they celebrate like it's like, oh, a judge did something insane. And it's like, oh, he's a hero. So I don't know. The Democrats, the politicians are afraid, I think, to step out of line and get blasted in the face. I think like their funding got shut off. I think there's probably less statecraft turned on Americans right now. The media doesn't work anymore. It's been laid bare for what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it goes. I will tell you there's a huge power vacuum, a massive power vacuum in the Democrat Party.
Right.
And not a single one of them is willing to step into that breach and say, you know what? I'm the leader that's going to fix this crap. Not a single one's doing it. And they're not going to, in my opinion, be successful unless they come in and say, we overstepped, we messed some stuff up. Here's my plan to fix it. And so I guess the cult's just going to get more insane.
They would have to jettison their entire worldview to do that. I mean, they'd essentially become, political, I'll put it in air quotes, conservatives. We messed all this up. Well, why did you mess it up? Well, because we were corrupt as hell and these guys did their stuff and they wanted a, world with no borders. I mean, really, AOC is going to step forward and say, you know what, I kind of goofed up on the borders thing. I mean, Green New Deal, I kind of, I overhyped that. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, she is screwing herself up into a resistance, that's for sure. And it's like, I guess we're going to see what like groundswell economic populism combined with like overthrowing oppressive corruption machine. We're going to see how that does toe to toe with like eat the rich populism, which seems to be like what she's doubling down onto. So it's like, okay, you lost the middle class people, you lost the working class. Now you're going to lose the billionaires too. Like, how's that going to work out for you? So it's like, who's your friend then? Like, what platform It's like insane people on blue sky.
Yeah, the band's striking up. Who are you going to dance with?
Yeah, exactly. But it's awfully hard to say, well, we overstepped. There's too much corruption. We need to evaluate ourselves and change when Trump has somebody at the top of the DOJ. Like, it's probably not the right time to do it. I think, and I don't know, right? But Pam Bondi only got sworn in at the end of last week, maybe. I don't even think she's had 3 days in office yet, business days.
Yeah, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday last week she got sworn in. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I pray for a future where what we're seeing is a new RICO case announced every week, because I don't even think we've seen what the DOJ is going to bring to the table yet. And if it's like Hegseth is out there, like making a hill to die on and auditing the DOD, like that's the right hill to die on for the DOD. I can tell you, like, we all know how much waste there is there.
Yeah, it's $1 trillion. It's $1 trillion budget every year.
So we've seen like this web of NGO funding. We've seen the DODs under attack. We've seen the most salient, wasteful, and unconstitutional agencies like literally go to the guillotine. We have not seen any legal ramifications yet, and we're going to.
Yeah, I think
just question how much.
Yet is the key there. Yeah, got to get all your. Yeah. You got to build your case before you issue the warrants. Mark, we're out of time right now, but you got to come back on, brother. This is great.
Anytime. Yeah, I loved it. We got into some pretty lit stuff.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we could do this every day. They're
topics.
probably the first 40 minutes of the show would be, hey, guess what just happened?
Yeah, I have Twitter shunted into my brain right now.
Oh yeah. It's.
I thought like the election. I didn't start Twitter until August, and I got a lot of attention because I was calling pollsters liars. And I'm after the election, I'm like, oh, that's it. Nobody's going to care about politics anymore. And it's like, no, this is literally like, this is October 2024 level of engagement right now. I can tell you that.
It's and as long as Elon there and his gang of 22-year-olds, as Hillary Clinton refers to them, as long as they keep churning through this stuff and posting something new. I mean, Elon this morning, $59 million paid in direct defiance of an executive order. I just, there's an awful lot of wood to throw onto this awfully large bonfire. Don't see it ending.
They need to start banking these. They need to start banking their shock and awe. It's too much winning. Like, this is literally too much winning. There's so much stuff they could do. Here was my idea last night on Twitter. It's like Trump is a showman. And there's public opinion work that needs to be done here. What they're doing now is like satisfactory for the stage we're in, but people aren't going to be able to sustain the level of outrage, even if they like string these things out. There needs to be public leadership work to help people put their minds around the fact that their futures have been stolen.
Yeah.
And I think the most brilliant way they should do that is, as part of the CBS settlement, negotiate. 60 Minutes, this slot should go to the Trump administration. And they should produce a highly produced Doge Prentice show where every night every week they fire a new federal agency. This is what it's done. This is like the people at Doge going into it. Here's where all the fraud is. And at the end of the show, you're fired. Department of Education. I think give people the context.
Yeah.
Make it so nobody can doubt why that thing's on the chopping block.
Yeah. You got to just hold on to those dudes in the middle who went in November and said, I want change. Well, here you are. Even if they were Democrats, I want enough of them said, I want change. She's not changed. She's status quo. He's changed. Pull the lever. Let's go. Mark, you got to say goodbye. We're getting the hard wrap here, but we will definitely have you on again, bro. This is tremendous. I'll be in touch as soon as the show's over.
All right. Yeah, great to be here. Good show.
Alrighty.
Love it.
Love it too, man. God bless. Thank you. And that's it. We're out of time here, folks. If you like what you see and hear, please click on that donate button and help us, stay solvent and do all that kind of stuff in the short term. Coming to you from Houston, Texas. Yeehaw! I'm Gary Michael Voris. God love you.